everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ariel and today I'm presenting you with my first ever original tag. I created it myself, and that is the New Year New Book tag, which does sound kind of redundant. It's actually not that original. I was deep in my feels a couple weeks ago when I realized this idea of a book tag being created at the beginning of the year had already been done. I will link the other videos that I know of that have been created kind of as like a New Year book tag kind of thing. But I decided to go ahead and create my own anyways because, you know, why not? And I haven't seen anybody do those videos for a few years, so hopefully they don't mind. I originally was inspired to do this because there's this really popular book tag called the Mid-Year Book Freakout tag, and I figured it would be kind of fun to do one for the beginning of the year because I like the questions for the Mid-Year Book Freakout tag, so I created some of my own for this one. So yeah, on with the questions. So question number one is, how many books do you plan to read this year? And for me, I plan on reading 52 books, a book a month, oh my god, a book a week, and I had thought about maybe doing 100 books because last year I was like this close to reaching 100. I read 95 books last year, but I have a lot of things going on this year. I am graduating with my bachelor's degree, and I'm going to be trying to find a big girl job, so I don't know how realistic it is for me to be reading 100 books, but I decided to go ahead and do 52. I'll probably read a little bit more than that, but I didn't want to push myself, so. Question number two is, do you have any reading challenges for the year? I have quite a few. One of them is one that I have been saying over and over again, is I borrow a lot of books from my library, and I did the same thing again last year. Mostly it was audiobooks, but I really neglected my physical TBR. So for this year, I am making a goal for myself to read at least 3 books off my shelves a month. So it's manageable, but I'm also able to, if I want to read more, hopefully I will. I've only read like 1 book off my physical TBR shelf this year so far, so not going great. Question number 3 is, what was the first book you bought or checked out from the library? And I'll go ahead and answer both because, you know, not everybody buys books and not everybody reads books from the library. So the first book that I bought this year was The Historian by Elizabeth Kastova, I think? I don't know. This is kind of a spooky, gothic mystery kind of, where this woman finds papers that lead to Vlad the Impaler. I don't know. That's as much as I understand of the plot. It's a chunky book, and I'm kind of intimidated by it, to be honest, but I am really looking forward to reading it. I don't want to assume too much, but I have a feeling that it's going to be a favorite, but now that I said it, probably is going to be 2 stars now. The first book that I checked out from my library was an audiobook, and that is A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. I read her book When No One Is Watching last year and really enjoyed it. I know that she's known for her romance, and I love romance, so I wanted to check it out, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm about halfway through, and the audiobook, spectacular. Question number 4 is, what was the first book that you read this year? The first book that I read this year was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but I had high hopes for this book. I gave it 3 stars. It's like kind of a booktube, book community darling in the sense that he's a very well-known author, and a lot of people seem to really enjoy this book. I unfortunately was kind of spoiled for it and didn't realize that I was spoiled for it. And I didn't think that the spoiler was that big of a deal, but it turned out it kind of was. It definitely brought down the enjoyment for me personally, but it was still good regardless. I mean, it's a fine book, but just not a new favorite like I hoped it would be. What are 3 5-star predictions that you have for this year? I'm actually finishing up my 5-star predictions now, so I will be having I'll hopefully be having a 5-star prediction wrap up soon, fingers crossed. I do have a couple of other books that I vaguely think that I will love, but just, I don't know, I'm just kind of winging it. So as I said before, The Historian, but I'll list 3 new ones. The first one that comes to mind is The Idiot by Elif Botman, I believe, not by the Russian guy. This is kind of a 90s college-age literary fiction book, and it just sounds really good. And I bought the hardcover edition, so let's freaking hope I love this one. I bought it used though, so won't be as painful if I do not like it. The second book that I think will be 5-star for me, and I'm probably even more apprehensive about it now, is The Shadow of the Wind, I believe it's called. Is that? I'm trying to read it from my bookshelf. The Shadow of the Wind, yeah. This is, I think, I keep getting it mixed up with The Starless Sea, oddly enough, because I think the plots are very similar, but it's basically about this dude who finds this book and it leads him on an adventure. That's not a very good synopsis, but it's supposed to be like a really beautifully written, like the characters supposed to be really good and just supposed to be a good book. But I recently have heard not so good things about it, so for that reason I'm a little apprehensive, but I still have high hopes and I really hope that's 5 stars. The other one that I bought a few months ago was Sleepwalking by Meg Woldser. I heard about this book for the first time from Paperback Dreams channel. She really enjoyed it, and I think it's about like 3 girls who follow these poets who had committed suicide, and 2 of them are real life poets, like Sylvia Plath and Sexton, I think is the other one, and then a third fictional one. I think this is the first book written by Meg Woldser, and I have the edition where she wrote an introduction saying like, yeah, probably not my best work, but you know, I am very fond of it, which is always, you know, something you want to read when you pick up a book for the first time, but whatever. There's just something very, I don't know, dark academia about We're just gonna move on. It is the shortest book that I have mentioned so far, so hopefully I'll get to it soon, but yeah. What is one book you want to read purely because of the hype from last year? And there are so many. I definitely fall for the hype 100%. Now, if a book is pushed a little bit too much, I'm not that interested. It is so subjective too, because it totally depends on who you subscribe to and who you see on Bookstagram and Book Twitter and all that. For some reason, I'm not interested in reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Like, I was a little bit, and then the hype was too much, and I said, you know what, never mind. But I have not felt the same about From Blood and Ash, which is a fantasy romance. I may not like fantasy, but I am a slut for fantasy romance. And maybe it's because it kind of shares the same title as A Heart of Blood and Ash. Like, the titles are very similar, and they're both fantasy romances, but the plots are wildly different, I'm sure. I think in this one, you follow some type of maiden, and she and her guard have like some type of thing going on. That's all I want to know. Also, it's very chunky, so it's very intimidating, but I really want to read it. Like, especially if it's a fantasy romance and there's more romance than fantasy, I'm all for it. What is one book you meant to read last year but didn't? So that was kind of a mean question to ask because I'm kind of outing myself. I have meant to read so many more books and I did not, and I'm sure it's the same for you, so I'm sorry. It was also a very mean question for myself. I don't know why I did that to us. Moment of silence. But I think the one, I mean, there's so many books that I meant to read last year, but one that immediately came to mind was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And this is one of those books that is so popular. I mean, do I even need to say anything about this book? I have not read it yet, and everybody, like literally everybody who has read this book has loved it. Like, and if you have not loved it, please do not tell me. I don't want to hear it. I would like to live in this positive vibe. Like, I just want to assume that everybody loves it. I don't even want to read a 1-star review of it. Like, that is how hyped I am for this book. So I really hope it fulfills its, what am I trying to say? I just have high hopes for it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's not that I purposefully intended to read it soon, but I did buy a really nice copy of it, like the Penguin Classic edition or whatever. And it's a floppy paperback. I'm also a slut for a floppy paperback. Yeah, it's just like one of those books that everybody has read but me. And as somebody who really loves Gothic, like this, like there's just some part of me that really wants to read it this year, but it's kind of like once I read it, that's it. Like all of my thoughts about it, all of what I think it's about and what I think might happen, it will be like, okay, but this is what it's actually about. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. So probably is like also one of the most intimidating books on my TBR. You know, I think this might be the year I'll finally get to it. What book have you already DNF'd? And of course I had to put that question in there because I am the DNF queen. I of course have DNF'd many books, but one of them that I will talk to you about, which is like the first book I DNF'd this year, was Take Me Apart by, I don't remember the author's name. This plot sounded very interesting. It's been on my TBR for such a long time and I just kept checking it out from the library and like the audiobook, and it would return, and then I'd wait a couple weeks and be like, okay, yeah, now I want to read it. And then I'd have to return it, and then I'd check it out 2 weeks later. It was one of those cycles. And it basically, in this book, it's about this archiver who is hired by this guy whose mother was a really famous photographer who killed herself right in front of her son. And that plot sounded really interesting, and there's some part of me that's still like, if I could just like push through. But there was this really weird sexual vibe between the archiver and the dude. I mean, he's like, I should preface this, it happened years ago, so he's an adult man. I don't want anybody thinking that it's between this child and this woman. Oh god. Yeah, that would have been a reason for me to DNF it. But no, this is an adult man and a woman, and because this is a mystery thriller, suspense, whatever the heck you want to call it, I don't personally like that. Like, I felt the vibe was just not there. The sexual vibe between those two was just weird to me, especially when he's like, you think that he might have killed his mom, but it's like, she wants to bang him anyway. It's really, That's suspicious. What is a genre that you want to read more of this year? And so many, but the two genres I want to read the most of are classics and nonfiction. Last year was the most I've ever read nonfiction. I think I read like 6 or 7 nonfiction books, and I have so many on my shelves. Again, it goes back to the physical TBR thing. And also, I used to read a lot more classics than I do now. I mean, excluding school, like right now I'm reading more modern classics. Like I'm not reading like the classics anymore, but I used to read a lot more than I am now. And I own a lot of classics, Jane Eyre, for example, but you know, I also own like this huge bind up of all of Jane Austen's books, which is, by the way, a massive freaking book. So I don't really have like a set number that I want to read each month. I think that if I read at least half of my physical nonfiction TBR and physical classic TBR, I will be super happy. But you know, who knows? I'm not gonna stress out about how many I end up reading. I just know that I want to read some. Are you unhauling any books to make room for new ones? This question, it was kind of intended as like, I know that there are a lot of people who unhaul books and do like massive unhauls. I personally don't do that. Every couple of months, I go through my physical books and just pick off 4 or 5 random ones. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's been a little bit too long. I actually don't care about you anymore and just get rid of you. So I do have a couple of books that I plan on getting rid of just because I'm not that interested in it anymore. But yeah, I guess just like tell me if you have any grand plans to unhaul any of your books. I'm planning on getting rid of my copy of the 4th book in the Frog Princess series, which I mentioned in my worst of video that didn't go up, which will I record it? Who knows? But yeah, that was awful. It's a library edition, so it looks ugly anyway, so I don't even want it. Also getting rid of Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I really tried to read it last year. I got up to page 55 and I said, nope. The next question is to look at last year's Goodreads winners in every category. Are there any that you agree with or disagree with? Are there any winners that you're interested in reading? This is, of course, like kind of 3 questions in one, but basically, I am always interested in people's opinions of the Goodreads awards. Of course, it is a popularity contest. I feel like it's kind of assumed to be that at this point. There's really no, like, it's the winners end up being the most random books that I've never heard of before. So I like to hear people's opinions of the Goodreads Choice Awards. Of course, not everybody cares about them, and I honestly don't care about them that much either. I think I only voted for like 2 or 3 books, and the rest I was just like, whatever, you just do your own thing, Amazon. For me, I really agree with the best debut novel, I think it was, which was Such a Fun Age, which I've talked about a million times already. And I think that was awesome. I'm so glad that that book won. If I were to disagree with any of them, which I mean, I don't know, I guess probably the nonfiction, which was A Promised Land, I think it's called, by Barack Obama, which, like, I know, but it seems like it came out literally December 30th and won, even though 2 people read it. And I personally just don't enjoy political nonfiction, like, by presidents. I like reading about politics, but reading a memoir by somebody who used to be the president is just not appealing to me. And even though I am happy that From Blood and Ash did win, because I'm looking forward to reading it, so if so many people loved it, maybe it is really that good. But I am kind of sad that Beach Read didn't win, just because it was my favorite romance of last year. And then in terms of winners that I'm interested in reading, I'm definitely still interested in reading Mexican Gothic and Cast, which I've heard amazing things about. And I'm also kind of interested in The Midnight Library. Like, I feel like it came out of nowhere. Like, nobody read any arcs of it. It just popped up one day and then won the Goodreads award for whatever category, best fiction, whatever. So it must be that good. I don't know. I'm not gonna push myself to read it, but if it ends up being there, what am I saying? The last question is, if you could recommend one book for someone else to put at the top of their 2021 reading list, what would it be? This question is kind of for like a book that you would recommend to everybody. So for me personally, I wouldn't put my favorite book of the year, just because that's definitely a book I see a lot of people having problems with and not enjoying. But I guess if I could recommend one book, which is one that I'm recommending because it surprised me so much, is Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi, because it's a fantasy sci-fi book that I surprisingly ended up loving. And I just think it has such excellent commentary on political and social and racial issues. It's just like such a good book. And I've said this before, but it's a book that I literally can see being taught in college classrooms. That's how much information is packed in there, and just a good book. So yeah, that is my New Year, New Book tag. In the description box below, I tagged some of my booktube friends, but anybody who is watching this video is more than welcome to participate. This is my own tag video, so the more people who do it, the more awesome it is. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!